Welcome, welcome, welcome to Legal and Ethical Issue. This is a very, very interesting lecture, and it's about our environmental environment. Where should the line be drawn between private property rights, and your employment rights, where they sometimes they ask you to stop doing certain work, and I remember at the corporation that I was working with, where they asked us to stop manufacturing a chemical because it was poisoning the Passaic River. Where are we going to draw the line between private property rights, where a company can manufacture whatever they feel the society needs, and to protect the environment and to preserve endangered species? That line is very, very fine, and we are still evaluating it from time to time. So the first part of this lecture is business regulated by the government in the interest of protecting the environment. Now be very careful and keep this in mind, because you're going to see later on in the course or in the lecture that what is government interest in protecting the environment, because business is regulated by government to protect the environment. Well, how far can government go into protecting the environment to the point where business should be shut, and a lot of people will lose their jobs and different things like that. So let's go to the next one. So introduction. This part of the lecture will preview some of the basic tension between the right to enjoy private property and like I said before, business having the freedom to make society better without harming it, versus to protect the environment from the increase of pollutant growth and the need to preserve endangered species. Now think about it. It's not just to protect the environment from pollution, but also to save the endangered species. Introduction again, then the question then is how then to pay, because if the government is going to do that, then who's going to pay for it? And of course, it's the word balance again is determined to be appropriate. Well, again, what is appropriate behavior? What is appropriate payment? What is appropriate balance? The courts commonly balance the equities between the harm caused by the pollution and the cost of stopping it. This is very important for you to keep in mind whenever you hear any environmental issue, or you're working as a chemical engineer, or you're working in a quality and safety. What is the balances between the harm that it's causing to the environment, and also how much does it cost to stop it? That is the balance that the court will overdo it. So let's be concerned about overprotecting the environment, which has prompted so many laws that regulate the use of property to protect natural resources and endangered species. Again, you still have a right to property. You have a right to life. You have a right to liberty, to do whatever you want to do with your property. And you have the right to pursue happiness. However, compliance with this environmental law can be very, very expensive. Now let's get on a hypothetical and try to visualize yourself. Suppose you have inherited, your grandfather, your grandmother left a piece of property about 2 hours from where you live and work, an undeveloped lot on a lake. So you receive the good news that now you own some property, and it's in a beautiful spot, and you intend to build a small summer house on it, so you and your family can go there to have a nice vacation. And this is your dream. This is great. Your grandparents left it to you. You have been saving up to this, but after 5 years has passed, environmentalists discover that your property is part of a critical habitat for the spotted green-toed garter snipe, a species of lizard protected under the federal endangered species. Now, I don't know how you feel about lizard, but visualize the green-toed garter snipe species of lizard, and they are in your property that you just have inherited from your grandparents. This means that you will never be able to build on that land. What will be your reaction? To some of us who thinks the result is perfectly fair, well, after all, I just inherited this land. It didn't cost me a penny. The government's going to want to save it. I think it's nice because later on, my kids going to learn about some lizard that otherwise they would disappear completely. So now suppose you change, and suppose you pay $80,000 for the property, and or if the garter snipe was one of 150 lizard species in our state. So the one that they found in your property, it was only one species of 150, and you pay $80,000. Now what is your reaction? Do you think that this is fair? And of course, if you think the result is unfair, that's not fair, because look all the money you spent, and it's only one type of lizard out of 150. Then let's now have another scenario. Our spouse is dying of cancer, and scientists have discovered that the spotted green-toed garter snipe tongue is a crucial ingredient of a recently approved drug that seems to be producing remission of that particular cancer. Now, here they might have something that not necessarily cure the disease, but will help your spouse live longer and less pain. However, we do not know, you do not own the land, just that your spouse now is very sick. But our neighbor does, your neighbor does, or your friend next door does, you know. Should the government be able to prevent habitat destruction? By the government doing that, there is better chances of your spouse live longer and less painful. And that's your neighbor owns the land. But whether they pay for it on inheritance doesn't matter. But you need that to help your spouse. The principal source of environmental law are common law action. Now, just keep those hypothetical in your mind. These are the different ways that the government regulates business when it comes to protecting the environment. Through common law actions, which you remember, that's another term to use to say case law, where you go to the court and the judge make the decision. State and local regulation, which is Congress that enact a statute, and you remember again, the case law is protecting the individual in that case, where statute protects the society at large or the reasonable people. And then you have federal regulation. So you have local, state, and federal regulation. The common law actions, the legal action or the keys that get you into the court to be heard about your case is nuisance. That's one of them, which I find very interesting. Person liable if they use their property in a manner that unreasonably interferes with other rights to use or enjoy their own property. So if you have a person that is using their property unreasonably and interferes in, it's a nuisance to other people in the neighborhood, then you have a legal action to do something about it. And another one is negligence, because if there is another way to stop the nuisance, or if there's another way to stop the pollution, if the alternative to stop the pollution is cheaper than the injury to the people, then the business has a duty to do what? Of care, reasonable care. They have to do something about it. So business or person allege failure to use reasonable care toward a party whose injury was foreseeable. And then, of course, strict liability. If business knows that the chemical that they are polluting the water or goes in the air is injuring other people, they have the duty to stop it. They have the duty to find the technology to stop that. And therefore, they are negligent in doing that. And of course, strict liability is just because they're manufacturing a toxic that will hurt people. And you know that, again, it's a commissioner that decide which chemical or studies that decide, or the Food and Drug Administration decide which drugs is, which toxic or whatever. They make the decision. Okay, the common law action, of course, it's very difficult to prove in court because both negligence and nuisance, you have to show that it is the pollution or the polluter, like the company or the people or the person that is causing the harm. And of course, you know that in business, there is not such a thing where a business only manufacture one chemical. We have a variety of chemicals. We have many things that one chemical makes is mixed with a lot of other chemicals. So this will be very difficult to prove which one does cause the harm. Contamination by the industry pollutants also do not cause immediate harm. Sometimes years goes by before we discovered that a certain pollutant caused cancer or asthma, like in certain places in New York City. So negligence and nuisance are reactive rather than proactive. That means somebody has to be hurt. Somebody has to be injured before we can find out who is the polluter and then which pollutant caused the injury, which is very difficult to prove. Courts have often denied injunctive relief on the ground that the hardship that would be imposed on the polluter, which is the company, and on the community are greater than the hardship suffered by the plaintiff. And this is under common law. Very, very seldom, if never, that I can think of my experience as an attorney where a company was stopped from manufacturing a certain chemical. And of course, these are the difference, again, that balance, you know, which is more expensive, which causes more damage to the community, closing the business, or is it the injuries suffered by the plaintiff? One case that I found very interesting, and it's in your textbook, is the Boomer case. In the Boomer case in your textbook, the plaintiffs convinced the court that Atlantic Cement Company that the dirt, the smoke, and vibration emanating from the plant created a nuisance. Ironically enough, although plaintiffs had managed to fit their problems into one of the common law pigeonholes, the court still would not shut down the cement company. They went under the key of the legal action of nuisance. The injured parties were awarded only money damages. The plaintiff that suffered the injury, they were awarded money. Now, the question that I have is the majority decision likely to deter future pollution by doing that? Because the company still continues to have cement. The majority allows the company to pay once and for all damages to compensate the plaintiff who brought this case. But at the same time, goes on, the plaintiff and anyone else near the plant will be affected by the polluted air. So just the group that was injured and brought the case, and now remember, you cannot take the same party for the same legal action in court. So if later on some more plaintiff gets hurt by the pollution in the air, they will not be able to bring the case again to court with Boomer. This is very, very interesting at all. We call it res judicata. This thing is being adjudicated already, therefore it cannot be repeated again. The majority, in other words, is licensing a continuing run by allowing the company the chance to pay off a limited set of plaintiffs for the right to continue polluting. So really, if you have the money, you can continue to pollute. That's in few words. Now keep this case in mind, because later on we're going to contrast it to the legal landscape and strategy of the South Camden case that is also in your textbook. Please post your comment and discussion. If you have any more questions about the Boomer case, please do it in our bulletin. Thank you.